Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week, I have a really cool guest with me. This is Jeb Scruggs from Squatch Hunters International. And we're going to be talking Bigfoot and maybe some other stuff tonight. So, Jeb, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate you taking the time. It's always
Yeah,
fun to talk Squatch and talk, whatever cryptids we've been seeing in our backyard.
yeah, definitely, man. And I know we've been trying to get together for a little while here. You reached out to me a few months ago, and I said, "Oh, I'll get back to you next week." And it's just, blink of an eye. It's now
Hey, bless
July.
you for actually getting back to me, though. You'd be surprised how many times you have that, oh, don't worry, I'll get back to you. And then it's just crickets for the rest of eternity. That happens.
Oh, I'm sure. And yeah, but like when you wrote to me, I made a little note of it. So I was like, I got to get back to Jeb on this. And it just, time goes by. And then finally I was like, all right, I'm doing it this week. I got to reach out to him. So yeah, glad we finally got it together. So yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you guys do? We'd love to hear about it.
Sure, I'd be love telling folks. So we're a Squatch Hunters International. We're an organization of like-minded individuals who have a different position on Bigfoot, Sasquatch, depending on who you ask. It's important that I say like-minded, not identical-minded, because we do have our fair blend of skeptics and also just different types of Bigfoot believers. So we have correspondents all over the United States. I'm based in New England myself. We have a correspondent based in Washington, so you can imagine he gets plenty of foot traffic up there, and being in the Pacific Northwest. But
Oh
he goes
yeah.
by the call sign True Believer, and he's one of those supernatural Bigfoot type of believers. So he believes in the energy, the ley lines, teleportation, all manner of supernatural phenomenon. And he kind of deviates from Bigfoot. He does a lot of the alien UFO stuff, and he's currently working on a project where he's doing a little bit of investigating into artificial intelligence.
Hmm.
So that usually goes above my head. But are you familiar at all with what they've been calling AI hallucinations?
No, I have not. I saw you had an article on your site about some AI, and I was digging into that a little bit before, but yeah, tell us about that.
Oh, sure. So that was just his initial kind of findings on it. So AI hallucinations occur when you use a large language model such as ChatGPT or OpenAI, whichever model you're using, and they don't just scrape the internet for information; they actually create information.
Hmm.
So they're creating false information and feeding that false information into the algorithm. So you end up getting even falser information on the back end because you are using that false premise to create further false premises. Now, a lot of people might say that that's just that's just language model failing on a part, but he seems to be under the impression that it's a little more nefarious than that. He thinks there might be something in that system, in that algorithm that might be trying to come forth. And like I said, he's still working on that project, but he's a if I'm an outdoorsman, he's an indoorsman.
Okay.
So he's continuing his research in that field. But that's just one of our correspondents. We also have a gentleman out in Colorado, Grizz. He's up in the Rocky Mountains pretty much all summer trying to find what he can up there. He's also up there in the winter skiing a lot. We haven't found any snowbound footprints or tracks yet, but that is one of the goals for the coming winter season. Let's not rush summer away and start thinking about winter already. But when that does come, we do have some goals on the back end for what to look for. We also have a correspondent down in Boston proper. He goes by the call sign Gizmo. He's a very high techy type of guy. He's got probably the most fancy, expensive camera he'd ever laid hands on. I'm recording with a cheapo depot little webcam here, but he's got
Yeah,
the
me too.
the lens that's about this long. He's basically in a sniper position, recording something from about a mile away, and he's kind of anti AI. He's very much, I need to see it on the film. I need to
Hmm.
make sure that this stuff is in my pocket, else he doesn't believe in it. He's one of the more skeptical members of our group. But like I mentioned before, it's good to have that mixed bag of true believers and skeptics. So when you do find something that you think might scratch that itch of Sasquatch, you don't automatically jump to conclusions. You take a little time to temper your reactions, and I think that's an important thing to do. So you're not always jumping up and down. But
Oh,
our
absolutely,
last course,
absolutely.
yeah, another correspondent we have down in Florida. He actually had the closest encounter, we think, with some kind of cryptid while out on the water. He's what I like to refer to as a maniac. He'll be out there wind sailing on on a hurricane, like literal last hurricane that went through Florida. He's out there trying to get his kite out there on a board because he's just trying to get the highest speed he can on it. But while out there one day, he actually lost a couple of fingers on his left hand to some creature out there. He wasn't able to identify it. As I mentioned, it was probably a storm, and usually he's able to identify the larger creature, sharks. He sends me photos all the time of, hey, Jeb, look at the shark I found out there. And again, maniac, because you're not going to catch me dead out there with just a tiny piece of, I don't want to say plywood, but a tiny piece of surfboard between me and a creature that could eat me in a couple of bites. But, we do have folks all over, and we also try to travel. We have Gizmo went out to Africa, actually, a couple months ago. He was looking for the Nandi bear.
Oh yeah,
Which was a local Sasquatch equivalent, I guess you could say, out there. And he took his big fancy camera, took a bunch of beautiful photos of all the flora and fauna out there, and tried his best to track down some of these supernatural creatures. He actually asked his guide. He said, "Hey, I'm looking for something a little more unusual than what you normally show people. You show them the elephants, you show them the lions. I'd like to see a Nandi bear." And the guide just pretty much brushed him off like, "No, we don't do that here." So, I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean locals only, or does that mean
yeah,
we don't want to participate as a...
Yeah, that's interesting. It's not like, oh, that doesn't exist. It's like, no, we don't do that here.
Right.
That's
a very
interesting reaction. Yeah.
And we actually have Grizz. He's out in Spain right now. There's been a couple of, I'll be honest, he's out there because his wife wanted him to go to Spain. But I said, hey, while you're out there, why don't you take a look and see if you can find some kind of supernatural activity? You might as well check the world while you're at it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's essentially the basis for Squatch Hunters International. It's just everywhere around the world, you've got some different story of a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. You have the Yetis in Southeast, or not Southeast Asia, but in like Nepal. You've got the like I said, the Nandi bear over in Africa, and then even in South America, you've got your different iterations of Sasquatch as well. I never can pronounce it correctly. I think it's the Mapinguari.
I actually just did an episode on that a few weeks ago.
Oh, you know what? I did see that. I saw that. I thought that was funny because we were just talking about that on our end.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they said that it's a creature with these backwards feet that actually has a mouth on its stomach that it eats through. A lot of unique details on that, but nonetheless, it's essentially a Sasquatch. It's a large bipedal figure, hairy, with potential human intelligence that could potentially have some kind of supernatural characteristics to it. So
yeah, definitely. And that's what always interests me is that, this is not like strictly a North American legend. Almost everywhere in the world has some sort of, like you said, bipedal, hairy humanoid, and sometimes they're shorter, sometimes they're taller. They may be different colors. They may be bulkier or thinner, but you have this variety, but it's all basically the same, quote unquote, Bigfoot sort of creature.
Right. And if you want to deviate from Bigfoot, you also have your different local critters as well. So one of my favorites up here in New England, we have Lake Champlain. That's the big lake between Vermont and New York. And they have a creature, it's known as Champ the Lake Monster. So have you ever heard of Champ?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So you're familiar. Every time I go up to Burlington, I always think it's so charming. They've got that critter all over the town. They've got murals of them. I think the local baseball team's got them featured as their mascot. There's all sorts of, references to them in pop culture. And a matter of fact, they actually have state law up there. The Vermont state law iterates that you are not to harass, hunt, or otherwise, bother Champ in the slightest. That's a protected fellow, and you better do what's right and not try to bother him.
That's cool.
Yeah, which I always thought was amusing too. So you have this legislature who's always having difficulty trying to pass whatever laws they need to, but they're like, you know what? This is important. Yeah, I want to make sure that we have this one on the books.
Don't harass the lake monster. Yep. Very cool. Yeah. So you're strictly in New England then?
Yeah, I find myself. I mean, I travel very little bit. Sometimes I'll go
Mhm.
see the other correspondents, which we can have a little, adventure on our own. But very usually, I'm up in the New England area. I do a lot of my tracking in the White Mountains.
Mhm.
That's mostly in northern New Hampshire. I also try to get over to Maine. I get over to Vermont, and I'm actually planning on getting down to Massachusetts in the next week or two. There's the Bridgewater Triangle down in
Mhm.
Massachusetts. Are you familiar with it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I always love when people know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, I feel like I might be a little crazy. But
Puckwudgies and
yeah,
Hockomock Swamp, and yeah.
that's right. The Hockomock Swamp, Solitude Stone out there. There's lots of supernatural phenomenon that have been occurring down there. So I'm going to make it a point to try to get down, definitely check out the swamp and see if I can get a good view of the different fixtures down there as well. But that's just one feature up here, and then I do plan on getting out to the Pacific Northwest personally. Just one, visit the other correspondents, make sure I can get True Believer out of his out of his desk for a while, drag him out in the woods. I was telling him, like, you got some of the most beautiful country in the world up here, and you're just not really taking advantage of it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get to the Pacific Northwest at some point too. Just, I mean, if you're into Bigfoot, you kind of it's got to be on your bucket list at some point, you know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been trying to get to some of the festivals that have been coming up this summer, but they're all either in the Pacific Northwest. There's some in Tennessee, some in Kentucky, and that's just barely a little too far for me to get easily in a weekend. But I gotta definitely make sure to make yourself available, at least something coming up.
Yeah, there's one I'm going to in it's like in St. Johnsville, New York. So it's like kind of like the southern tier Adirondack Mountains, and
Oh
Jeff
yeah,
Meldrum's going to be there, Esteban Sarmiento, Cliff Barrickman. So good group there, but that's like early October. So I don't know how
yeah.
far that is for
I'll
you.
take a note of that. That's just a hop, skip, and a jump from here. So I'll
Yeah, yeah.
definitely maybe we'll talk after this. So I can get some details. But that
Oh
sounds like
yeah,
a good
definitely,
time.
definitely. So how long have you been doing this? How long has your group been together, and have you been doing it before then?
So funny enough, this group's been together for probably a little almost 10 years at this point, but
Wow.
we weren't always as big into the supernatural as we are now. What really kind of kickstarted this was actually earlier this year. Actually, I'll get to that. Why don't I go ahead and tell you a story about what happened to me a little over a year ago, and
Sure, sure.
then we'll dive into from there. So this was about, I want to say, 14 months ago. This was May of 24. I had gone up to the White Mountains to spend a weekend with my wife, Mrs. Scruggs, and we stayed in this adorable little town of Bethlehem. It's just the most pristine little mountain town you can imagine. It's a little bed and breakfast. There's just a little couple of restaurants on the main drag, a church, just the bare necessities for small mountain living. So I went up there and we spent the weekend doing what you do up in the mountains. We did a good share of hiking, and we were hiking on Mount Kinsman. So this was must have been like the third week of May, and at this point, it's not quite fully green yet up in the White Mountains. We're still in spring.
Hmm.
The leaves are still budding. There's still a lot of life emerging at this point. So even some pockets of snow still exist up there. So you got to make sure to bring your micro spikes just in case you have to walk across a little bit of ice. So we go up there. We're fully prepared to have a rough go of it just in case. But we get there, and we're the only two folks on that entire trail, which is exactly how you want to find a trail.
Yep.
We start hiking. We're having just a grand old time. It's a little greener than we expected. We get to the summit. It's a granite dome, so we're sitting on top of the granite, looking over at God's creation, seeing all the greenery, eating our smashed peanut butter and jelly sandwiches from the bottom of our backpacks, and they never quite taste as good as they do on top of a mountain.
Oh yeah.
So we're sitting there eating our sandwiches, and we get ready to depart. So we start walking down the mountain, and I've got probably a good 8 inches on Mrs. Scruggs, and my leg strides a little longer, and I'm a heavier fella, so I pick up momentum going downhill. So I must have been a good 50 yards in front of her when we were walking down this trail, and I get to this corner, and I look and I see a little movement in the bushes. And I think nothing of it. There's plenty of movement going on. It's spring. There's a lot of birds out, and it's very often a bird or a little chipmunk or squirrel or something innocuous that makes the loudest noise, right?
Yep. Oh yeah.
So I see this little shuffling, and I see I see this like hairy face around the corner, and my stomach drops. I think this has got to be a bear. And it's just about that time of year where you've got those bears coming out of hibernation, and they are hungry and they are not very polite.
Right.
So I turn around and I start just hoofing it up to Mrs. Scruggs. And once I get to her, I just tell her, like, honey, there's a bear up there. We need to wait for it to pass. Now, luckily in New England, all you have are black bears. And as everyone knows, what do you do when you see a black bear?
Yell and scream and make yourself look big.
You yell at it, you say a mean word to it, and those are cowardly little critters. They will run off into the woods and you'll be fine.
Yep.
Of course, when you're actually in the moment and you're facing down the barrel of a bear, you never quite have that presence of mind at that time. You start thinking, "Oh man, this thing is hungry. It's got bigger claws than me. It's likely bigger than me. This thing's gonna cause me harm."
Yep.
So I tell her that, and we just kind of stand still. We're just holding position in the middle of this trail and hoping that it'll walk by. So we hear these footsteps right off to the left in the tree line, and they sound like the most delicate little footsteps. It doesn't sound like big, heavy, lumbering, slonking. It sounds like a dainty little tiptoe almost. Like I was thinking squirrel or chipmunk at that point. So I look over and we're following this noise from the wood line, and I see dark fur. I see it hunched over, and I think that's my bear. Let's just relax and hope that it'll pass by. But it looks over, and it immediately gets up on 2 feet. So it gets up on 2 feet, and for lack of a better word, it boogies. It walks at an accelerated pace through that little clearing back into the tree line. And it must have been like 40, 50 yards away, so I didn't get the best look at it, but it was very alarming seeing it walk the way a man would walk. It was swaying its arms the way a man would, and it was walking with purpose. So these legs were walking and strutting along. I mean, have you ever seen a black bear walk on 2 legs?
Not in person, but I've seen it in videos and at the circus and in the zoo.
Oh,
And everybody's seen that. And yeah, they go 2 or 3 steps, if that, and they're very clumsy and they kind of keep their arms. They have to balance themselves.
Yeah, that's right. There's actually there's a charming little tourist trap up here called Clark's Trading Post. And what they do is they actually have bears at the location that have been, unable to survive on their own. So they take them in, they rehabilitate them, and they do the little circus tricks in exchange for some delicious blackberry ice cream. So they'll get on a little bicycle, they'll toddle around, they'll stand on a barrel, they'll do a little dance, they'll be in a tutu, and they'll walk on 2 feet. But they toddle around like a drunk toddler. They have no grace in the slightest.
Right.
So when I saw this thing walking the way I would walk, I don't know what it was, but it shook me. And I look over to my wife and I said, "Did you see that?" And of course she didn't. She was like looking at her phone at the time, so she didn't actually see. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? That could have." All right, man. Whatever. And being, naturally curious, I tell her like, "Hey, well, let's take a look around. Let's see if we can find some like paw tracks. Let's see if we can find some broken limbs. Let's just see what we can find. I want to know what the hell that was." But she was still very much in bear mode. In fact, she was looking up like, "Oh, our bear's out this time of year," and I'm like, "I could have told you that, honey. They're probably out. It's springtime." So she was in the mindset that she wants to get off this mountain as soon as possible. So I did the smart thing. I listened to her and I said, "Yes, honey, we can do that." So we ran down the mountain at an accelerated pace, and then we got to the car and we took off. And honestly, I didn't think anything of it for a very long time. I just thought that was an unusual experience. And since then, we actually come across bears a couple of times while out in the woods. And some instances were actually scarier than the others because there's one point where we came across a mama bear and a couple of cubs.
Oh yeah.
And that is the only time you can see a black bear and think, okay, this is actually really dangerous. Because if you come between a mama and a cub, you're going to be looking for a better time. It's not going to be a good time.
No.
But I remember looking at them and thinking, like, I was making sure to like observe their behavior, the way they were. This was actually this was earlier this year, springtime still. So same idea. It's just in time for hibernation to come in. And this mama and her cubs were very slowly foraging through the woods. They were very cautiously, very sluggishly almost. I know they were sluggish because I was waiting for them to pass, and they took minutes, which doesn't sound like a long time. But when you're standing there staring at a bear and you're waiting for it to like hopefully not notice you, minutes add up and it feels like a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember thinking like that's a very different behavior than the one I saw up in Mount Kinsman. And ultimately, going back to your point, what started all this, back in February of this year, I just happened to, by random chance, I was looking at my local library's coming soon events just to see what they were doing. And Ronnie LeBlanc was actually putting a presentation on. It was just called simply "What is Bigfoot?" And I thought, hey, I'm a curious guy. I'd like to see what this guy has to say. And I didn't really think anything of it, but I asked Mrs. Scruggs, "You want to go see this?" And she said, "No, I'm busy." So I went to this event and I met Ronnie LeBlanc.
Mm-hmm.
And he told us all about his experiences down in Monsterland. That's Leominster State Forest out of Massachusetts. And when we talk about different styles of Bigfoot enthusiasts, he's definitely in the supernatural portals and spiritual orbs and all sorts of things beyond flesh and blood. I'm personally a flesh and blood Bigfoot believer. I think that Sasquatch is out there. It's a creature, but it follows the rules of any other creature that's out there. It's going to have to find a source of food. It's going to find a source of water. It's got desires, needs, wants, and in the winter it also gets cold.
Mm-hmm.
So those are I'd say in my opinion, it's not really an opinion. It's just a fact. You got the two different camps of Bigfoot enthusiasts. And
oh yeah,
I learned a lot from Ronnie that day. This is back in February. And I was just enthralled by this. And as he's talking, I'm thinking, like, is that what I saw up there? Could that possibly have been Bigfoot or a Sasquatch that was up in the tree line? And it just made me kind of reevaluate the way I think of the outdoors up here. Like, just hearing about all the different experiences that folks have had. And the funniest thing that he said that whole night was he told us about how many sightings there are each year of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and the BFRO, I forget the exact number. I'm not going to pretend I know it, but there's a certain number of sightings each year. And he says there's actually far more sightings than that each year. Those are just the reported ones.
Right.
And he says, you might ask, why won't people report it? Well, it's because they don't want to sound like a crazy person. And I thought to myself, that's exactly why I didn't tell anyone about this for the last year. I didn't tell anybody about that experience of Mount Kinsman because I thought I'd be looked at like a crazy person.
Right.
But that's what really triggered the whole formation of Squatch Hunters International. Because at that point, I started talking to the guys. I'm like, look, we've always kind of had this interest and this like in the back of the head, and let's just take this seriously. Let's just get out there and do our best to contribute to the community and do a little research for the Bigfoot Sasquatch community. And ultimately, that's what caused the formation of the group. And now we're trying to get out there and just share what we found. And that's what we usually post up on the Instagram. And we're looking into doing some more video content soon to show you what kind of things we found out in the wilderness.
Yeah. No, very cool. And so were you like really heavy into Bigfoot before your sighting? Because it sounds to me like you're seeing this thing and you're not even really thinking Bigfoot. Even when it stands up and walks away like a man, you're still kind of thinking like, that's a weird bear. And you're not, because you didn't mention Bigfoot. You didn't like say like, oh shit, I saw Bigfoot. You're just sort of saying, that was weird. So were you really into the Bigfoot stuff before that? Or is that really what thrust you more into it?
So I'd say it's that thrust me into it. Like we've always had our interest that we talk. I mean, we met in college, so we'd always have our interest in like conspiracy theories, UFOs. But it was just kind of a thing to talk about at the bonfire, a thing to talk about at a party. It wasn't something that we spent a significant amount of time. So maybe I would have thought Bigfoot if I had a little more, that in a little more to the forefront of the brain. But at that point, I was just again bear. I know to be afraid of a bear. I don't know. I don't know if I should be afraid of Bigfoot. Something tells me we'd get along out there. I feel like I exude a live and let live type of personality. I think maybe we can get along. But a bear, well, I guess we did get along at the end of the day for the other set of bears. But still, it's just that primal fear up front that kind of clouded my thought process.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of people don't realize how trauma can affect your brain. And that's, you always hear skeptics saying, why didn't you take a picture of it? Why didn't you take out your phone and record this? Why didn't you do this or X, Y, or Z? And they don't realize that like psychologically, when you see something, whether you understand it or not. And again, if you're just in bear mode, because again, you're saying, yeah, this thing just came out of hibernation. It's hungry. There might be cubs nearby that I'm not seeing. So even if you don't see the cubs, you have to be a little bit afraid of even black bear because you don't know. So there's always that sense of danger and trauma, and you tend to get that tunnel vision. So yeah, I've heard a lot of stories like that where people, they don't even realize that, well, maybe that was Bigfoot until like they get home or like the next day and they're like, oh, maybe that wasn't just a weird bear.
And yeah, that's been happening. Well, not that exactly, but the last this whole summertime, I've been out there in the wilderness. I'll hear like a strange noise. I'll try to pull up my phone and record it. I'll try to like get the documentation, and even then, like I either don't have the dexterity to get it done in time, or I don't have the thought to do it at the time. So I think the next step is to definitely get a GoPro or something, just strap that to the chest, have that recorded constantly. So when you have these little clues out there, you don't have the opportunity to miss it, so to speak.
Right,
but,
right.
Yeah, no, trauma especially. You're right. Like when you recollect something, even the next day versus the next week, you're going to have a different memory of that experience, depending on your distance from it and whether you're living in the moment at that time.
Yeah, yeah. So were you able to get a gauge of like how tall or how big this thing was? I know you said it was about 50 feet away.
Yeah, it was hard to gauge the exact height based on how far away it is, but it was. I'd want to say taller than me. Okay. I'm 5'11". I used to be 6 feet when I was on Tinder, but I'm 5'11" now, my honest height. And this thing looks a little bit taller than me. So I'd say above 6 feet, but I couldn't tell you by how much. I was just going off of the height of the trees that it was around versus what I thought that would gauge compared to me.
Right, right. Okay. Very cool. Yeah, and you didn't really get a good look at the face. I mean, other than seeing it initially when you thought it was a bear, like was it running away from you or?
So it was pretty much a side profile when I saw it in the distance, and then only the side profile when I got up and left. But when I saw it from the tree line, I pretty much saw from eyes up is what I thought I saw. I didn't see like a snout or anything. I feel like that might have been the dead giveaway of a bear if I saw like a big snout. But I just saw eyes and above, and again, I just naturally assume it's got to be a big hairy carnivore that's coming after me. That's, of course, I'm the eternal pessimist. I always assume if there's something unknown, it's out to hurt me.
Right. Well, that's survival in the woods. You gotta, and like you said, nine times out of 10, it's a chipmunk, it's a squirrel, it's birds fighting in the trees or doing something else in the trees. But you have to be alert. You have to pay attention to everything because you just don't know. You don't want to turn that corner and stumble upon the mama bear and her cubs. And you'd rather just be scared of the squirrel and be relieved that it's just a squirrel than be a jerk and bump into a mama bear. So I get that.
But honestly, some of that fear, some of that anxiety you get out in the woods, I find it very therapeutic actually, because it's something that you as a human are meant to be afraid of and meant to be anxious about is your survival. You're not anxious about that spreadsheet back at work, or anxious about talking to your boss, or anxious about having to have a prolonged meeting with the client. It's just, this is what we were built to do, was survive out here in the woods. And sometimes after you have that fear, you feel a little grateful that you had the opportunity to experience that, even though you might not quite appreciate it in the moment.
Oh yeah, well, it puts things in perspective. that, just, yeah, how, insignificant we are compared to nature, and how insignificant our, first world problems are. Like you said, a spreadsheet or the email that you got to send to your boss tomorrow, it means nothing when you're, 6 miles into the woods and your car's not nearby and you have no cell phone service, and oops, where are my matches? Like, I'm not gonna be able to start a fire tonight. How am I going to get through the night? So yeah.
Yeah, that's the definite definition of type 2 fun, you know? Are you familiar with type 2 fun?
No, what is that?
So type 1 fun is you're out doing something, you're having fun while you're doing it, and you look back on it fondly and think, I had a lot of fun doing that. Type 2 fun is you are hating life in the process. You are having a miserable experience. There either is too many mosquitoes or bugs, or you're about to flip your canoe, or you were just terrified. But you look back on it fondly and think that sure was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's type 3 fun. That's where you look back, or in the process, you're having a miserable time, you're hating life, you do not like the experience, and you look back on it and you think, I'm never doing that again because that was a miserable time.
I've had a lot of the type 2 fun. I'll tell you that.
I've been doing a lot of walking in the woods the last couple of weeks with how warm it's been. It's finally at the point where it's like a nice, beautiful 70 degrees at night. And yeah, there are plenty of times I'm out there, I'm thinking, oh man, my phone's about to die. I don't got my GPS on me. I'm going to have to follow this very narrow trail back to the cards. Hopefully I make it.
So do you go out by yourself most of the time then? Because I've been following your Instagram for a while now, obviously, and I see you do a lot of videos, and you're out there at night, and you find a lot of cool stuff, weird looking trees and weird structures, and so you're out there by yourself mainly?
For the most part, yeah, I'm out there by myself. Sometimes, whenever it's a nice hike, I'll bring my wife with me. It's just when I bring my wife, I do have some limitations. So when I'm by myself, I'm out there making Squatch calls. I'll do some whistles. I'll do some wood knocks. But then, I'm with my wife, and she's like, Jeb, please, for the love of God, do not make any Squatch calls out here. If there's another hiker on the trail, I don't want them. You're going to embarrass me. So I got a little more liberty to, be a little more expressive when I'm by myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, for a lot of the time it is me. But sometimes you'll catch the two of us out there on the trail, especially if it's a nice hike. And that's always the beauty part about doing a little squatching is even if you don't find any trail or any signs that day, even if you don't find any wooden structures or prints on the ground, you're still out there enjoying the woods. And it's always a great time, no matter how you slice it.
Oh yeah, you can't go wrong with being outside. So, have you been investigating a lot of local reports near you?
So actually, I've been getting hooked up with a lot of local folks in the last couple of weeks. I've done a couple of podcasts, and almost every time I talk to someone, they know somebody in the area, either in Maine or somewhere in New Hampshire, some down in Mass. So I'm doing my best to kind of either bring them into the fold, into Squatch International, or just talk to them. But we're going to be starting a podcast soon, so I'm looking to interview some of these local folks too. But I haven't looked into any particular reports. I'm out there kind of honestly just kind of freewheeling it for a lot of the times. I just find either a local hike that I can get to after work, or I make a day out of it, get up in the White Mountains, make it a whole day's hike. Because I am fortunate in that even in around the town I live in, you can drive 5-10 minutes in either direction, and you've got a pretty remote little slice of woods. So there's plenty of trails and also plenty of just kind of open not state park, but public space. So even if it's just after work, frankly, between you and me, after this, I'm probably going to be checking out a river a little bit up north. Going to do a little fly fishing, see if I can see any marks out there while I'm at it. So that's just kind of where I go is whenever I get the opportunity, I got a couple of free hours, I get out there and see what I can find.
Awesome. And that's great. Like where I am at, I can't really do that. I'm in the city. So for me, it's, a couple hours drive to go anywhere that's realistically remote enough to even think about running into one of these things. Yeah. So very cool. Have you found anything out there interesting? Like I mentioned, you found some weird tree or stick structure sort of things.
So I do find a lot of wooden structures out here, and I've got my own theory on the purpose of these wooden structures. So for the most part, some of them are little tiny ones, which could be just some kind of marker. I see them around water constantly. So around the river, or there's like some babbling brooks. You'll hear the brook, and then you'll see a little structure out there. I don't know if that's to mark it, if it's a food source or what, but some of them are just these large wooden teepee-like structures, and they're big enough for me to fit in. I'm a large guy, so it's big enough for me to fit in. I'm sure it'd be big enough for Bigfoot to fit in as well. And I am almost certain that these are some types of shelter. So in the winter up here, it gets real bad. I think literally the coldest temperature on Earth has been recorded up here in New England, up on Mount Washington. It was like negative 180 degrees or something ridiculous like that if you include the wind chill. So come wintertime, you got about 6 months of everything being just frozen solid. And like I said, I'm a flesh and blood type of Bigfoot guy. So if they're out, if you're cold, they're cold.
Right.
So I'm almost, I mean, I can't say with certainty, obviously, because I haven't caught one in the act, but these things are very clearly capable of being shelters in the winter. And I think what I'm coming across is the leftovers of a structure. So in the winter, it probably has a little more, lack of a better word, structure to it. It probably has a little thatch in between. It probably might have some mud kind of covering the gaps, and it might be a better windbreak than when I find it. But I'm finding these skeletons out there, and that's what I suspect is the source of them, is them being created as temporary shelters in the winter. So you see a lot of those. I did have that one experience up in Mount Kinsman, and I had a similar situation, a similar experience on Mount Morgan a couple months ago, actually. And it was I think it's what you characterize as a class B experience, because it was all something I heard, but I wasn't able to see anything straight up. But I walked up this trail, and Mount Morgan's a beautiful trail. You get to the top, there's actually a ladder system you got to climb to get to the very top. So I climbed the ladders despite my acrophobia, despite the fact that I looked down a couple of times and almost had to quit. But I made it to the top, and it was just a nice, beautiful day. And on my way back, I'm walking down the trail, and I hear just this loud crash. And when I say loud crash, it's like, it's not just the shuffle in the woods that you hear when you think it's a chipmunk, squirrel, or bird. This was a very loud thunder and crash. And as I'm continuing down the trail, I actually see an entire tree had collapsed into the trail. And I actually stand there for a few minutes, and I ask a couple of people who are coming down, I'm like, hey, I'm not crazy, right? This tree was standing when we came up the trail, right? Because this is blocking everything now. And they're like, oh no, this was definitely not blocked on the way up. What are you, do you do trail maintenance? Are you a park ranger? I'm like, no, I'm a Sasquatch enthusiast. I got important things I'm looking for here. But I took a look at this tree, and I did post it on Instagram. It had a very clean break halfway up the trunk. So it was also a windless day. It was a very, very calm, light sprinkle, perhaps. I remember it was raining a little bit on top, but it wasn't windy in the slightest. I was up there just very, very still with a tiny drop of water every now and then as you're, again, eating your smashed peanut butter and jelly sandwich up there. But not a lick of wind. So that surprised me that this thing toppled like that. And it didn't topple by the roots. Like, it didn't kind of upheave the entire tree. It was just a very, very clean break in the middle. You could even see like the I guess fulcrum isn't the right word. I was never a physicist, but the joint where it tipped.
Right.
It was like a very clean break. And I thought to myself, like, what could have done that? And, of course, now my mind goes to Bigfoot more often than it used to, but I couldn't help but wonder. I mean, it was tall. It was probably like 8 feet up into the tree, which, maybe within reach of me, but not easily. So it had to be something big, and it had to be something strong to be able to cause such a very quick, decisive break.
And this was like a living tree. This was not like a dead.
Oh yeah, you can
tree.
still see it toppled over onto the trail, and it was just greenery. Like, it looked like a giant bush that had just sprouted up because all the leaves were still intact.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that stuff. Full disclosure, I'm sort of skeptical about anything that we don't see Bigfoot doing. So the howls, the tree knocks, the tree structures, I take them all into account because I've heard some weird stuff, and to my ears, it's like, well, what was that? It sounds like Bigfoot. It sounds like an ape in upstate New York, which should not be. and not a little ape, not a monkey, you know, something like when your chest reverberates and, you know, people in town are like, oh, it's probably a barred owl. I was like, no, like I'm 6'1" and this thing was like rattling my chest. This was not an owl. This was not a coyote, you know, half a mile away. Um, but you do hear these stories of these tree knocks or structures. And uh, do you find these structures like near the trail, or are these like way off trail?
So as all things, it depends.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they'll be right off the trail. It won't be a very far walk, and sometimes I'm just kind of stomping because I'll find a nice clearing. I'll see a nice flat area, and if it's flat and there's not too much grass, I'll just kind of walk out there because
Mm-hmm.
um, ticks have been really bad this year. I'm pretty sure it's pretty much everywhere that ticks have been just out in force.
Oh
So
yeah.
I am super cautious about that. So I'm more afraid of ticks than I am of bears now at this point. So I make sure I tuck the sleeves in, or the pant legs. I make sure I wear long sleeve shirts, even though I sweat my ass off out there. And I, even though I'm covered, avoid anything that looks ticky.
Mm-hmm.
So if I see a nice flat area and there's no grass and I can walk a while and also keep eyes on the trail, I'll just walk out in the woods. So it'll be completely off trail. And some of those structures you see out there are just seen out there kind of randomly, either in a stream I came across while walking or just abruptly out there. The one in Massachusetts, I posted it was in a pine wood forest from Cape Cod.
Mm-hmm.
That one was pretty much right in the middle of the woods. I had to like take off trail before I found that thing. It was not very close to the state sanctioned trail. So it depends.
Yeah, and I'm always with the belief too that, you know, because you have skeptics who will say, oh, like people could have done this. It was probably people, it's probably hoaxers. And to a large degree, I agree with that to a degree, you know, that a person could do this. But then the question becomes why? And you say, okay, hoaxers, fine. Hunters, I don't see a hunter doing this. You know, they're out there, they're trying to blend it. They're not going to spend, you know, 3 hours building a tree structure. They're going to bring a tree blind with them, or they're going to pre-scout out a tree blind. Um, and then the hoaxers thing, I mean, it's just, I'm sure it happens. I'm sure that teenagers will go in the woods and say, hey, let's build this tree structure and, you know, make people think Bigfoot's here. But how often does that happen? I can't imagine it happens as often as people find the tree structures. And like I found tree structures here on Staten Island, and they're small, and you know, you can hear the cars go. Like clearly there's no Bigfoot here. We're an island, it's small, and there's people everywhere. Like this thing is not hiding. So clearly people can do these things, but then you do hear about these things that are deep in the woods. And I think Les Stroud had said this too, Survivor Man, just, you know, when you go that far into the woods, why would somebody who's not an outdoorsy person, who just wants to hoax something, they're going to hike 3 hours into the woods, build a tree structure that nobody may ever find, and then hike another, you know, 6 hours back out of the woods? Why? Like, what is the point? You'd think that if they're going to hoax something, they're going to hoax footprints, they're going to hoax other things. So yeah, the tree structure thing, I'm kind of on the fence about that, because yeah, people could be doing it, and I'm sure a lot of them are people, but when, like you said, you're finding one way deep in the woods, why is that there? You'd think if someone's going to do this, they're going to do it close to the trail, so somebody walking is going to say, oh, what's that, let's go look at that. Why put it so deep in the woods if you're hoaxing?
And same vein as that, it's like if you're going to do that, what's your payoff? So you don't get to see the face of the people who find your structure out in the middle of nowhere. It's just, I did that thing. Maybe it'll trick someone someday, but I don't understand the payoff. Like if you're gonna fake something and you're gonna try to broadcast it or display it, that might be one thing. But just to have this out in the woods and then on the off chance that someone finds it, and on the off chance that someone makes the connection, yeah.
And dude, I say that all the time on my show, like word for word, like where is the payoff? Like if you're gonna hoax something, you want people to find it. You're going to go do this in your friend's backyard and put Bigfoot, fake prints back there. So he comes out in the morning, he's like, oh shit, there's Bigfoot. And then you can laugh at him, or it gets in the newspaper, or it gets on the news. Like, but to go 6 miles into the wilderness where no one is ever going to go and spend all this time and effort to hoax something that no one may ever see, it that really bothers me. And it doesn't convince me necessarily that Bigfoot did it, but it just pushes it more into that column for me that like that's probably not a hoaxer.
And if you're gonna do something, I mean, if you're gonna go through the trouble, you're gonna go big, right?
Yeah.
Like crop circles. I don't know if I believe any crop circles were legitimate, but I do know that there was a lot of folks who got caught, creating these things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, was it 90s or was it before that?
I think it was like late 90s, mid to late 90s.
Yeah, I think it was mid to late 90s. Yeah, you're right. I mean, that has a big payoff because you've got these gigantic things you're forging out in the fields, and you're going to see people, freaking out about it. It got put on the news. It gets out there. But to think that this tiny structure off the trail, it's. I'm not trying. I guess I'm just kind of supporting your position at this point now.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not disputing that this could be hoaxers. This could just be people doing it. But why? If you're going to hoax Bigfoot, go make footprints, put on a suit, and jump out and scare people. Like there was much more obvious ways than to put up a tree structure that most people are not going to see. And even if they do see it, they might not even recognize it for what it is. Because if you're not into Bigfoot, the average hiker is going to look, if you're not into Bigfoot and you're just hiking and you see this, you're going to say, some kids put up some sticks, and you're going to keep walking. The same average hiker who's not into Bigfoot sees a giant footprint. They're going to be like, oh shit, what is that? Let me take pictures. Let me go to the local media, because they're going to recognize that as Bigfoot because it is a big footprint. But a tree structure is going to go missed by most people. So it's like I said, I'm not 100% sold, but I'm also not really sold on the skeptical point of view either, that it's hoaxers and kids. Kids are on their phones these days. They're not going into the woods and spending 3 hours building tree structures that no one's ever going to see. It's just weird to me. So to me, it's just kind of like in that unexplained category. Like, I don't know what to make of those.
And to my point earlier about having a kind of a mixed representation of the community, it is important to have folks like you who do kind of have that even temperament to think, could it be this, could it be that? Because yeah, I do agree that it's good to at least consider other options before having your confirmation bias go to the one thing that you want it to be.
Yeah, and I'm like you. I'm the flesh and blood camp. I'm that this is a natural creature. But at the same time, I can admit that there are things about it that don't make sense. People, will find these track marks or track trails that go into the middle of a field and then just stop. So how do you explain, like, even if it's a hoaxer? So, okay, fine. Let's say that this is a hoaxer. How did the hoaxer get into the middle of a snowy field with these giant footprints and then make it back out without leaving a return trail? Did a helicopter, so now are the hoaxers, hiring helicopters to pull them up out of this field? So there are things that even in this natural explanation, this natural box that we want to put it in, that don't make sense. And I don't want to necessarily jump to like, oh, he just went into a portal, because now you're explaining one mystery with another mystery. You're saying, oh, right, the UFOs came and picked up Bigfoot, or he went into a portal, or he opened up a dimensional door. And so that to me is just a crazy leap of faith to just come up, oh, it's a portal. Clearly it's just a portal. And I'm not saying it's not, because maybe it is, but that's why I just kind of keep things in the we don't know category. I'm not going to try to explain it with a portal or with UFOs, but there are things in the Bigfoot lore that just don't make sense for a natural animal either. But then again, you have people seeing these things eating and drinking water and leaving scat. So it's all just really puzzling.
And that is one of the problems when you start thinking with portals and you start introducing that stuff, everything can be explained by a portal at that point. Like literally anything you see, it's almost like Superman. It's too powerful. It can explain literally anything once you start talking about portals, which is not one of the reasons I kind of go into the flesh and blood camp, but one of the things that makes me lean that way.
Yeah. And my friend Josh, he's been on the show, and he sort of introduced me to this concept. It's from religion, but it's called like the gap of the gods. And it's just basically, if we don't know what did it, God did it. So like, where did this come from? Oh, God did it. We can't explain it by science. God did it. So it's the same sort of thing here. If you can't explain why these tracks disappeared, or why I shot at Bigfoot and the bullets seemed to have no effect, oh, he must be interdimensional. He must have gotten picked up by UFO. It doesn't really solve the mystery, because it's like, well, okay, well then where did the UFO come from? Where did it go? How did this Bigfoot know how to open a portal as it was being shot at? It's just, So it does get a little crazy. And again, I don't judge people for believing that because I could be wrong. Maybe it is a portal. Maybe they are from UFOs. But, for me, it's like, let's focus on one mystery at a time.
Yeah, you and I are very, very much alike. We think very similarly when it comes to that stuff. So you and I there's a reason we've been getting along in the last hour. So we're
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
same thought process.
Definitely, definitely. Um, so are you into other aspects of the parent? Yeah, I mean, we mentioned the Bridgewater Triangle, and clearly you mentioned Champ, and we've talked puckwudgies and Hockomock Swamp. So do you have any other interests besides Bigfoot that you're researching or hoping to research?
So I moved to New England about, I want to say 8 years ago at this point, 8 or 9. And I never was big into kind of the, well, what do you call them? Ghost, specifically
Mhm.
ghost. I was never too big into ghosts. And when I lived in California before this, and there was a couple of times we tried to like go to the abandoned insane asylum to
Mhm.
spend a night there. And really it was an excuse to share a bottle and tell ghost stories in the night. But moving to New England, there's so much more supernatural lore here when it comes to you have the Salem witch trials, you have just a lot of hauntings and a lot of weird experiences up here. So I've been opening my mind to that type of stuff. I'm not going to say that I believe in it quite yet. My wife likes Ghost Adventures, and I'll watch that, and I'm like, I'm like really skeptical about the investigations that happen there. But I'm doing my best to stay open minded, which is all you can do. And now that I'm in this kind of region where it's more common, I want to say,
Mhm.
I'm in trying to look into it a bit more because you have to think this is the oldest region in the United States, at least when it comes to modern colonial times. So more people have died here, just generally because we've had people here the longest
Oh
compared to
yeah.
out west when we haven't really quite made that manifest destiny spread out there. So I've been doing my best to kind of look around and just look into it. That's why we have the my interest currently in the Bridgewater Triangle. I'm planning on going to those locations like the Solitude Stone and
Mhm.
seeing if I have any type of visceral reaction to being in a place where they say could have had that type of energy. And again, I want to believe it. Like I'd say agnostic plus. Like I don't know if I believe in it, but I want to. So
Right,
we'll
right.
see what I can experience while I'm there. But in terms of other like cryptids, like I said, like I'm very interested in the local ones. The Champ was an interesting one,
Mhm.
and there's also the Wendigos, and I had a weird experience years ago. At this point, I was down by a river, and I was doing some fishing, and I did this thing that I always do, which ends up being a mistake because I stay a little too late. I tell myself one more cast,
Right.
and that cast is a dud. So one more cast, and next thing you know, the sun is set. So at this point, I wasn't quite as well prepared as I would be nowadays. I didn't have a headlamp. I didn't have even a flashlight. All I had was my cell phone,
Mhm.
and I have my gear. I've got my tackle box. I've got my 2 rods, and I'm trying to walk back to my car. And it's not really a trail, but it's not like deep deep woods. But I'm walking along the river, just kind of bushwhacking up, and I think I hear like footsteps possibly, and I think my first thought is okay, it's some person out there. I better start walking a little faster. And then I started hearing these goat noises, just these very loud like meh, and I think maybe there's a farm nearby I didn't think about. Maybe it's something, but I just kept hearing rustling and goat sounds, and I booked it. I beat feet out of there as fast as I could. And this was well before I even started thinking about anything paranormal, but it scared the hell out of me. And looking back, I'm like, oh, was that some type of like spirit thing? Like if it was actually a goat, it uh, I don't know if it would have behaved that way. I haven't met enough goats in my time up here to tell either way, but it was just a very unusual experience. So that's like that's a Algonquin Native American type thing too.
Mhm.
So you got to think about pre-colonial times too, all the different uh, you know spiritual creatures they had and their stories that they had in their folklore. And I try to focus on that too, because, when you think of New England, you think of Salem witch trials most common, but there's a lot of, a lot of folklore that comes before that I'm very interested in.
Oh yeah, like you have the Wendigo, you have the puckwudgies are big there, which is like if people don't know what that is, it's like little people and of the woods, and they're supposed to be
Almost like
humanoid and
hedgehog like. They've got quills, they got spines on the back, at least a couple of different iterations of them. So
yeah, and they're supposed to be really malicious, and maybe they can kind of speak a language, and they kind of mimic our language and try to lure people into I mean, all sorts of like weird, but those go back to Algonquin times too. Like there's just a lot of these legends, and you wonder where they come from. And yeah, skeptics can say, oh, this is just made up to explain this or that. And I think there's a difference between trying to explain lightning and thunder versus creating an animal from scratch and saying, "Oh yeah, there's these 8 foot hairy guys running around, and there's this dinosaur like creature in the lake there, and there's these little hedgehog people running around." Like that's not trying to explain something that's just misunderstood. That's out of whole cloth. You're just creating these legends, thunderbirds, and all these things that the Native Americans had, and again, skeptics just kind of dismiss them out of hand, and I'm not so sure we should.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, I do. I appreciate that kind of explanation, though. Like, it's not just explaining a sound or a noise or some natural phenomenon. Like, I like that whole cloth, creation of a of a creature that.
Right, because you used
Yeah.
to have eclipses. What was the eclipse? Oh, it's a dragon eating the moon. And they would make these things. And even as kids, what's thunder? Oh, that's the angels up there bowling. And of course, there's lots of legends that are there to explain natural things, but then you have these other things that are just what is Bigfoot there to explain? Sasquatch. What is the puckwudgie there to explain? What is the thunderbird supposed to explain? And maybe some of these things don't exist anymore. Maybe they were just passed down. But at some point, it does indicate that native populations maybe did have giant birds running around or flying around. So always cool stuff to investigate. Uh, Anything else weird in the woods happen to you? You've mentioned a couple of things now. Your Bigfoot thing, the goat thing. Anything else weird happen to you while you're out there in the woods?
So there have been countless nights where I've been hiking in the woods and I've heard some like strange sounds and I wasn't able to get to them. But that very well could have been anything. It's when you're out there at night, you've got a headlamp, like that little globe of light that you find yourself in is your entire world.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
once the sun's completely set, you really have no idea what's out there other than what your little band of light can see. So there have been plenty of instances, especially in the last few weeks, where I've been out there and I've heard either like what I thought were footsteps, or I've heard something. Most recently, I actually had a pretty spooky experience on this trail. It was my most recent Instagram reel. I just heard like what I thought was multiple footsteps,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know if it was supernatural, if it was just people, but there weren't headlights, there weren't lamps. I called out, I didn't get an answer, so I thought, all right, I don't like that. I'm running. So I started recording just so I could have documentation of it. And as I was running, I saw a wooden structure off on the sidelines, and it was really close to trail, so it is what it is. But again, just a very spooky experience, which I couldn't explain in the moment, and I certainly can't explain now.
Yeah, yeah, and I always try to tell skeptics too, like get out into the woods, go out at night, go camping, spend an overnight, because it's very easy to sit at home and say, "Oh, you just heard this," or "That was a natural sound." You get out there, and yeah, you hear footsteps but don't see headlamps, or you hear human voices and don't see headlamps, and you're in the middle of nowhere. You're nowhere near a trail. You're nowhere near a trailhead. Uh, I'll tell people, I'm not saying it's paranormal. I'm not saying it's Bigfoot or ghosts or whatever, but I've had some weird shit happen in the woods. And I think if more skeptics would get out there and spend time out there and nights out there, they'd start seeing like, okay, what was that? And again, it doesn't mean it's paranormal, but like weird shit will happen. You will hear weird things.
Yeah, I was talking to Drewski from the Cryptid Warfare podcast over the
Mm.
weekend, and he said one of his practices was every time he goes out for what he refers to as an operation, he always brings at least one skeptic with him. And I love that idea. So I'm going to try to do that myself. Is to, whenever we get a group going out there, at least bring one skeptic, just so they can either experience things firsthand, or just be out there and see what it's like. So I'm going to take that practice to heart and see what I can do.
Yeah, yeah. No, very cool. Very cool. Uh, so yeah, did you have anything else you wanted to share with the audience
I
here?
could yap about Bigfoot all day, but I feel like I've covered a lot of ground today, and I say I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me and let
Oh
me
yeah,
let me talk to you a
absolutely.
bit about it.
Yeah, so just let everybody know where they can find you. I know you mentioned Instagram. I know you guys have a website. I'll put links to everything down below too, but just for anybody listening.
Oh yeah, sure. So squatchhuntersinternational.com. You can find our articles we've been drafting. We're very shortly going to be kind of transferring those into more of a video format. We know that's a little more enjoyable to have something on YouTube to watch rather than just reading an article like a newspaper. So we'll be doing that. You can find us on YouTube at Squatch Hunters International. We're going to be posting, like I said, those videos up soon. On Instagram, the handle is WW Squatch Hunter for Worldwide Squatch Hunter for those of you who don't remember the old WWW days. But pretty much Squatch Hunters International everywhere. You'll be able to find us, and you can see what we're doing out in the woods, and you can stay with us and keep on squatching.
Awesome. So yeah, definitely check them out, everybody. I've been following you guys for a while. You put up a lot of good content, and yeah, this was awesome. I had a lot of fun talking to you, and
Yeah, me
finally,
too. Appreciate it.
yeah. And if you ever want to come back on, if you got some stories to share, welcome to have you on. And if you guys start up your show and you need a guest, I'll more than happy to help you guys
No, I'd
out
be
if I
happy to
can.
have you. And like I said, we got all the correspondence. I'm looking to get them a little more outgoing. So hopefully I'll be able to get
Yeah.
them to make some appearances soon. Yeah, I'd love
Yeah.
to come back and share some more information with you.
Awesome. All right, man. So thanks again, and we'll be in touch.
All right, thanks, man. You take care
All
now.
right. Take care. All right, everybody. I want to thank Jeb for coming on the show. Some awesome stories from him, and his organization does some good work. And we're very much aligned in what we believe, and that's pretty cool. I mean, I'm open to all sorts of differing opinions and everything on here, but it's good to always just find a kindred soul, kindred spirit in the Bigfoot world. So yeah, go check out his site. I'm going to put all the links to his Instagram and his website down below. And really cool Bigfoot story. I mean, just we hear that so often that somebody sees what they think is a bear, and then it stands up on two legs and walks or runs away. Just weird stuff, but a very cool story. So I thank Jeb for sharing that. If you guys have a Bigfoot story you want to share, or any sort of story, we talked about other things here tonight, ghosts and puckwudgies and lake monsters, shoot me an email, jason@oddanduntold.com, and I'm happy to share your story. And until next time, everybody, question everything. Jeb and I had a good conversation. We're sort of questioning each other and what did you see and how big was it? And this is how we learn. This is how we get more detail. This is how we understand each other. And we're all in this for the same purpose. We just want to get to the answers. So question everything, everybody. Embrace the weird. And until next week, everybody, rock and roll.